Well, we're pleased to be joined by U.S. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. So thanks so much for coming into our studio up here.
Thanks for having me back.
You got it. Obviously, a number of wildfires throughout the state, certainly around our area. Over a year ago, wildland firefighters did receive a pay raise connected to the infrastructure law, but that raise was temporary, expected to run out at the end of September. What do these men and women who are, hey, right now protecting our homes, protecting our lives, our state, what do they have to do to avoid losing this portion of their salaries come October?
Well, it's just unacceptable to me as Oregon's senior senator to not, in a few weeks, bump up that pay again. These are incredible heroes. They're battling 4 fires in the area now, and they put themselves in harm's way every single time there's a fire in order to protect us. And I think it is essential that they get the pay hike, number one, and we begin to move towards a year-round professional firefighting force. I mean, it used to be, and you've heard me talk about your grandfather's, fires. They weren't as big, they weren't as hot. Now we really need these firefighters virtually year-round. We need them. We need technologies that are modern, and that's what I'll be pushing this fall.
Why was originally when this pay raise came in, why was it temporary?
Because I think the Congress said, well, we're dealing with the national budget. Let's wait and see what happens. Well, I think we've seen what happens, and the whole country has. I mean, fires that come from Canada and New York feels smoke. We heard today at the briefing that there are so many fires throughout the West that to some extent assets are frozen. And that means they have to make tough choices about where to put the assets. So what we've got to do now is make sure that firefighters get adequate pay. I'm also going to, with Congresswoman Val Hoyle, I'm going to push legislation that ends some of the red tape and bureaucracy that our firefighters face when they need to make modest, purchases of material and equipment when they're in the middle of an emergency. When you're in the middle of an emergency, we don't need any more red tape.
That makes sense. And obviously these fires have an impact in so many different ways. We were out at the Eugene Emeralds game last night, which had to be cut short because of the air quality. We've obviously experienced poor air quality. Now it seems like almost a regular occurrence each summer.
It hurts our ag industry. For example, I've been working hard with the farmers to get ready for a lot of their challenges. They're concerned about inheritance taxes, the small farmer, for example, and what they're telling me is about smoke taint. And there's some new technologies that can help deal with that and still make the grapes usable. But what we ought to do is recognize that it takes a big hit to have a big fire.
Not to mention, people are less interested in coming to Oregon when we have these fires, tourists. And so we're just losing out on portions of our economy because these fires have become so extreme and so regular.
And these are not your grandfather's fires. We look, for example, at some of the new technologies now. We have cameras that you can rotate, you can tilt, and in effect, you can get much more information to the guys on the ground. But when I was asked about it, I said, we can't assume these are your grandfather's fires. Now we've got to make sure we have technologies that aren't your grandfather's, that are more modern, and these cameras are going to make a big difference. I'm going to propose expanding that camera watch effort here this September.
I know you were in Eugene today at the University of Oregon to check in on some research programs that recently received federal grants from the National Science Foundation, both at UO, Oregon State, and at Portland State University. These grants boosting research into mass timber, semiconductor workforce, and creating a smart electrical grid. Key issues for Oregon industries in the future of green energy, and there's more money coming later this year. Am I correct about that?
There is, and we're pushing very hard. I'm the author of the CHIPS package, particularly the $24 billion in investment tax credits that's already being used, and there's going to be awarded some technology hubs, and I think it would be natural to have one in the valley. And lithography is a very important printing kind of process. That's the kind of thing that we're pushing hard for the Valley now.
I know, obviously, I want to stick with the electrical grid for a second. Obviously, there's been a push by many, understandably so, to get off of fossil fuels as much as we can. But right now, we seem to have a lot of evidence that says we're not ready to go full electric. Can our electric utility sustain a full-on push to electric vehicles and electric stoves? Are we capable of that right now? And so how do we balance this move?
Let's talk about where we are. I am the author of the biggest investment in fighting climate change in American history. These are the clean energy tax credits. And when we considered them in the Senate Finance Committee, I predicted that we would generate about $370 billion worth of private investment. Now there are market analysts who are predicting, because of the popularity of these clean energy investments, we might generate twice as much investment as I predicted. So there is a long, long way to go. We need to speed up permitting, for example, in terms of renewable energy. We need increased transmission capability. But there is no question that we're now making enormous strides, and quickly.
And particularly on that, President Biden has set ambitious goals for wind energy, and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has zoned in on some areas off the Oregon coast to potentially build some wind farms. The fishing community has concerns about it. I know that the tribal nations have expressed some concerns about it. Is this too aggressive of a move by BOEM to put these wind energy farms right off our coast?
I have met with both the fishing families and the tribes, and I was able to secure an additional time period for those folks to have a chance to comment. And I'll put it this way. I don't buy that it's either one or the other, that we have renewable wind energy or fishing families. I'm determined to come up with a policy that shows that the two are not mutually exclusive. We can have smart policies that do both.
Do you feel like BOEM is truly listening to them? Some of them don't believe that the administration is listening to them.
I insisted on the extra time window, the extra period to comment, just because I too had heard that fishing families were saying, BOEM's not listening. We secured the additional time. It's going to make a big difference. And I intend, and I think Senator Merkley will be joining me, to be very vigilant on this. And I go into this debate as the author of the clean energy tax credits. I worked for years on them. Technological neutrality, giving every technology a chance to participate, but saying the more you reduce carbon, the bigger your tax savings. And in doing so, we said we are not going to set up, arbitrary exclusions. And I think a smart policy here will provide for both wind energy and for our continued effort to accelerate to renewable energy.
Every month it seems like there's another spike in fentanyl deaths. We get these releases from the local police departments just saying 3 more deaths, 4 more deaths, too many. Recently, a teenager in our area died from fentanyl. You're looking for more coordination between agencies to try to crack down on this problem?
In particular, I want Oregonians to know that a central part of this, a key part of why we have been flooded, is it comes in through I-5 and 84. Those are 2 key transportation arteries through which this has flowed. And I brought in the Customs and Border Patrol, because I think they ought to be doing to crack down more on the cartels and the criminals that are using those transportation arteries. I think we also ought to be helping more of our local law enforcement officials. I met with the sheriff from Coos Bay here recently. He wants his area designated a high-intensity drug trafficking area. He's going to have my full support for that effort.
I know you're also working on impacting the role of pharmacy benefit managers, sort of the middlemen between insurance companies and the pharmacies. Isn't there just a problem with the lack of transparency in the health insurance industry in general?
No question about it. And these middlemen are really at the heart of the problem. They made sense 30 years ago when people didn't have computer data and didn't know how to use it and all this sort of thing. Now, that's no longer the case. And so what these middlemen are doing is instead of putting the money in the consumer's pocket, they're putting the money into the pockets of the executives. And we're spending more than $4 trillion on healthcare annually. And I'm increasingly convinced that these middlemen are the heart of the problem. One of my next targets will be to go after algorithms, because I think algorithms, based on the evidence we're seeing, are also being used to deny people coverage of claims that they should have satisfied.
I feel like a lot of people probably don't even know what a pharmacy benefit manager is, and that's a problem because these are people who are making decisions that impact.
They sure know who they are in rural Oregon, because so often in rural Oregon, those small pharmacies know more about the patients than anybody else, and they are getting pounded by the big pharmacy benefit managers who say, for example, after the point of sale, hey, I'm going to come on in and hit you with extra costs.
A lot to tackle when you head back to Washington. Thanks
It'll
so
be a
much for stopping
busy fall.
in. Sure will. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thanks for having me.